Welcome, I'm Rose Martin, and this is Real Life, the time that we get to spend with our very favorite life coach, Susan Harf, as she gives us tips and strategies, and sometimes the answers to those questions that are plaguing us to live our very best life. Like you, I can't wait to hear what's on her mind today. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Rose. I'm happy to see you, and I'm so glad that you joined us as well. So today I'm thinking about people who say, I'm so overwhelmed, I have so much to do, I just don't know where to start.
Okay, are you reading my mind, Susan? Because I think so many of us fall into that, and it doesn't even matter what time of year anymore. It seems just like, I don't know, hopefully it's not going to be we're all just so disorganized or we're not prioritizing. I don't know where you're going with this, but I'm going to pay close attention.
Well, I'm going in all those directions because I think that all of us have felt this way at some point or another. Usually when people have one extra thing on their plate is when I hear this from people. So in other words, you're going along in your life and everything seems to be sort of going well, and you're in your job and your roles at home, and things are all right. And then all of a sudden it's the holiday time coming, or we're planning a trip, or there's a parent who's moving in, or somebody is sick, God forbid, or something extra happens and we just aren't prepared for it, and we just feel like the whole tower is falling over, toppling over on you.
It's like the tipping point of those scales.
Exactly.
Everything's okay until that one extra thing gets loaded.
Yeah. And that's where I normally find people having conversation about this. But then there's another group where the person always operates like they're at the end of a sprint, like they're at this, what I want to say is, they operate like they're at the sprint at the end of a race all the time. They're always there. And those are people who seem very frenetic all the time. They show up late most of the time. They are always sort of out of breath. You know, they just got here and okay, let's go. And it's sort of anxiety producing for you just to be around them. So there's people who live that way too.
And you know what, as you say that, I've been thinking about the two groups of people. Some that are going through the regular mundane part of life, and it always seems like they're frantic and there's always so much to do. And then the others who kind of ebb and flow. Like you say, if you're going on a trip or something's happening, then you become overwhelmed and the to-do list is great, but it's not normally that way.
And so let's start by talking about why does this happen? Why do we feel this way? I think that certain people have a preponderance or a background that in their family of origin led them to this place. So in other words, if you're somebody who, when you were growing up, your parents were modeling doing too much. They were always running in a different direction. They were trying to do 3 different jobs, or they had a business and then they had a business on the side, or they were doing their jobs and they were doing other things to make extra money for the family. Those are all things that parents have sometimes modeled for their children, not really wanting to model for them doing too much, or your life is not worth anything unless you're living it to the max. But sometimes as children we pick up responses and we pick up things from our parents that they didn't mean to teach us, or maybe not in that way. Or they did it because they had to make ends meet and they had no choice, but that's not really what they want for you. And sometimes we get the wrong message about it. So for instance, let's just say we had a parent who, both of our parents had jobs and then they did work on the side and sometimes came home very, very late after we were in bed. Sometimes we can get the notion that our life is not worthwhile unless we do that. And yet the parent was just doing the best they could, obviously, and they were probably doing a great job, but they gave you the impression that your life isn't worth anything unless you do that.
I've got 2 thoughts. So one, I'm wondering, are there people who thrive on chaos? And number 2, are there people that just like to be so busy and scheduled for every single minute of the day that they don't have a chance to have downtime, or if they see downtime, they think of that as lazy time?
I love those questions, and the answer is yes and yes. There are people who thrive on chaos, but unfortunately those people interact with all of us who don't.
And it's exhausting.
And it's exhausting to be with someone
Right.
who is like that. You also get the impression from that person that their busyness is more important than your life. And I've heard people say that to me as well. It's as though that is what makes them feel worthwhile. And sometimes people do fill up their days and every moment because of their own anxiety about their life. So in other words, they fill up their time because if they didn't, oh my gosh, they would have to sit back and think once in a while about what they're doing or saying. And so when people tend to fill up the space, and I might add, they do that in a lot of different ways. Sometimes people fill up their space because of anxiety with stuff. I've been in people's offices and I've been in people's homes that I couldn't wait to get out of because it was just overwhelming to be in the midst of all that chaos. And when people fill up their life with stuff in that way, I think it's rooted in anxiety.
Is that the same thing for people who overschedule their children, to where they're going from activity to activity to activity, and out of school, do your homework in the car, we've got to get to soccer practice, and then you've got art class, and then come home, and it's like a ever-ending circle of just running.
Very, very thoughtful question. It can be. It could be because of that. I have some other ideas about why that might be too, but I want to finish about filling up. People can fill up their space. People can fill up their time, and as you mentioned, they can fill up their children's time. All of that being related to anxiety. Not always, but that's a something that we can point to, an example that we can see that maybe you're doing that, maybe saying to yourself, maybe I'm doing that because maybe I'm amassing all this stuff because of my anxiety, or maybe I don't stop talking because I can't sit back and relax and just think or just listen to someone else. All of those things are sometimes rooted in anxiety that started in the family of origin or maybe not. Started in the marriage, started when you had kids. There's different times also in people's lives when they take on too much. But as far as that kind of chaos, one of the things you can do about it is, let's say it's the chaos in your home, and that's making you feel overwhelmed and you have so much to do. When you don't have order around you, that leads to feeling a lack of order inside of you. So I do recommend that people take stock of that. And Marie Kondo's book about getting organized, that's something that I advise people to read. I've read it myself. I think it's a great book. And it helps you establish some order in your living space and your workspace so that when you enter the space, it doesn't bring you more anxiety and more disorder.
So it's kind of like that finding joy of her way of talking about it.
Exactly.
Or then saying, does this really deserve prime space in my closet, or prime space on my shelf, or prime space of my time in my life? Okay.
Exactly. So I think taking a look at your environment and the things outside of yourself can help you be less overwhelmed. The other thing about taking stock of inside you in terms of, how did I get here? Why do I think that I need to fill up every moment of my day? It's interesting. I was listening to an interview that Johnny Carson had with Joan Rivers when she was alive. And she said, I get nervous when I look at my calendar and there's not something on it. And I think what she meant was, if she wasn't working on that day, if she didn't have a job, it led her down the road of, oh my God, what if I have too many of those days where I don't get hired? What if that leads to no job? What's that going to do? I won't be able to provide for my children. It's sort of a spiraling effect, and then you start to feel overwhelmed. So take a look at your calendar, take a look at your life, and start thinking about, what is it about this life right now that I feel overwhelmed with? And then I want to move to thinking about how, not only how we change that, but why is that? So when we think about our lives, I think right now is a very good time to take stock of what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And sometimes we find out, well, let's see, why do I go to the certain group every Wednesday, whether it's an organization that I go to, or I go out with friends for lunch, or something that I've deemed that I'm going to do every Wednesday or whatever, maybe once a month. Maybe I do it because it's out of habit. Maybe I've just always done it, but I've never, after all these years, I haven't stopped to think, do I really like this? Do I really want to do this? And then comes the question of obligation. Too much of the time, we do things out of obligation. And some people will say to me, when I say that to them, they'll say, oh, come on, I have to do that. If I didn't make dinner every night for my family, what would they do? Well,
starve? No.
Have you considered saying to your teenager, guess what? From now on, Tuesday is your night. You can tell me what ingredients you need. We will get them at the grocery store when we do our shopping, and you're going to make us dinner Tuesday night. And you know what? If the teenager chooses to make you peanut butter and jelly, so what? Good, fine. They made it, you didn't. Now the thing you can't do, if they make it, you can't say, I'm not eating this. You gotta say, I'll eat it. But there are ways to trim what it is you do, and there's nothing that people do, nothing, that they will say to me, that I say back to them, you're right, you have to do all these things.
I'm curious, where does procrastination fit into this model? Because you might think you have a lot to do, but you don't want to really do that right now, so then you get diverted and you do something else, and then you get diverted to do something else, and pretty soon, let's say, you've started to clean the cupboards and you started to clean the closet and you've never answered those emails and you haven't done this and you're getting ready to go on a trip. So then you've created more chaos for yourself by not getting to do what you were supposed to do.
You're so right, Rose. You're such a good life strategist. The thing that you need to do is you owe it to yourself to have a calendar and make it as detailed as you need it. There are times in my life when I've had a very detailed calendar. And what I did was I stuck to it. So those times in my life were times when I had a major goal that I had set that was going to take me longer than just today or this week or next month. So I had time. The way I created time is I had time for that. There are some people who say to me, I don't have time to think about another job. I don't have time to think about another hobby. I don't have time to take a day off and go ice skating with my children.
Or I don't have time to do the calendar.
Exactly.
To plan what I have to do.
Yes. You say to yourself, I owe it to myself to take this time for me. And then you create the calendar. And the times in my life when I was trying to achieve a goal that was going to take a period of years, every single day on my calendar I had dream time. And the dream time meant to me that I was going to do something toward the dream, something toward the goal. Maybe it was make a phone call. Maybe it was just sit and think about how I was going to get to the next step. Maybe it was a book I needed to read. Maybe it was someone that I needed to ask for help with. Whatever it was called dream time in my calendar. And I had it for a brief time every single day. So
did you achieve that goal?
I did. I'm sitting here with you, Rose.
Oh, all right.
but as you know, this didn't start for me today.
Right.
It started many years ago. So yes, it was changing some of my roles so that some of my life coaching was done on the air.
Wonderful.
And but it didn't.
And we're
just
glad
happen.
you're here.
Thank you. It didn't happen just this second. You know, as you know, I've been doing this for many years. So the point is that it also didn't happen just by me saying, "Oh, I'd love to do that." So there's more to that story too about making actionable steps and all of that. But in terms of feeling overwhelmed, we feel overwhelmed when we procrastinate because the procrastination takes up our thinking time and it takes up from. When we procrastinate, for instance, if we sift through the internet, you can look at your clock and say, oh gosh, I've been sitting here for a half hour or an hour on mindless activity. So we owe it to ourselves to stick to the calendar and stick to what we said we were going to do. The other thing that we need to do is we need to reevaluate, as I alluded to before, all the things that we do and why we do them. And I honestly believe that there are many things that are in our calendar that we don't need to do anymore, that we think we do. So I'll give you some examples. We used to send out every year holiday cards. And as we moved, the list got greater and greater. So it not only started with the people in the city we were living in, it then extended to the people that we knew before we moved, and then we moved again, so it extended to the people in that city, and then it extended to the parents of my children's friends who we became friendly with, and it just got to be such a huge list. And I also felt the need to not just send the card, but write something on the card, something personal on the card. Sometimes, certain years we would take a family picture, which as my children got older, it would be harder to schedule the time to take the family picture. So all of these things became like a lot of to-dos on my to-do list. And I decided what would happen if I didn't send the cards out every year. You might decide what would happen if you didn't write the Christmas letter. You might decide what would happen if you don't include the picture. What would happen if you said, I'm only going to send a card to people that I'm not in touch with any other way? So the relatives don't need to get the card. I'm going to see them at the holidays. The next door neighbor doesn't need to get the card. She knows I'm going to wish her a happy holiday. In other words, trim the task or eliminate the task. I ended up eliminating over the course of time. I did it. First I said I'm only going to do it every other year. Then I said I'm not going to include the letter. Then I decided I'm not going to include the people that I see on a regular basis. And now I don't send the cards.
Really? And so that took away anxiety and a lot of that to-do list. I'm thinking of a very concrete example for me too, because going on a trip, I'll back myself out of like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If I've got a week, like what do I have to do on this day? What do I have to do on this day? Try to get it, crossed off the list to back into, so it's not going to be totally overwhelming with the last couple of days and thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get this all done? We're supposed to leave.
Exactly. And we all know that, I'll make a sexist comment right now, it is harder for women to pack than men because they don't have as much to bring. It's true. And they're not even concerned about what they have to bring. I'm not talking about anybody I know. But the fact is that we have more to bring, more to unpack too. So we need to back it out. We need to do it over time.
And I get used to having the house ready. So I know if I've got to pick something up at the store, or I've got to make arrangements for something, then I've got to have those done a few days in advance. Or if I'm going to bring a gift, I've got to make sure all that's done in time.
So the other thing we're talking about right now is time management. Mm-hmm. You're not just overwhelmed because you have too much to do. You're overwhelmed because you don't have the time to do it because you've taken on so much.
Or because you haven't managed the time appropriately.
Exactly. So I'm all for writing it down. Whether it's calendar is your thing or writing a list, whatever, I'm all for writing it down. The other thing that we need to do when we're taking stock of what we do, as I said earlier, sometimes it's because we've always done it, but other times it's out of obligation. We have people in our lives that don't need to be there. How's that for a statement?
Wow, that's something people are going to sit on to think, wow, what did she just say? We have people in our lives that don't need to be there. It sounds a little bit crass in a way.
It does.
Ooh, Susan, how could you tell us that?
Exactly. It sounds crass and it sounds harsh. But sometimes we are in relationships that are either toxic or they take energy away rather than adding love to our lives. And what I really believe is that we need to take stock of everything we do, including who we spend our time with. One of the things about getting older that I appreciate is that now I'm in a time of my life where I am taking stock of the things that I do in a very specific kind of determined way, because I view life as precious. I always have, but now even more so, I view the things, the way I spend my time, the things I do with my time, the people with whom I spend my time, those are all very precious people, time-consuming things. And I need to be cognizant of how am I going to spend this time.
I've been thinking about that too, because at my age, I know that there are more yesterdays than tomorrows. And so that's kind of humbling to think, what do you want to do, Who do you want to be with? How are you going to organize it? And what are those things that it's okay, they were there for a season, and it's okay for them to fall off on the wayside?
Yes. And you do have the right, that's the thing that you need. You need to have the confidence and the ability to say to yourself, I have the right to choose not to spend my time this way. So if you're somebody who says yes every time they say we need the room mother for the school or your child's classroom. No, you don't need to be the room mother every year. Well, that's what lets me have the pace of the school and the pace of what's happening in the classroom and to be in the know. You can be in the know without being the room parent. And forgive me for saying room mother, I meant room parent. You know, there are things that we do that we don't stop to think, do I really want to do this? And so often people say to me, but my life is full of shoulds because it needs to be. Some of those things don't need to be. I think I've told you the story before that when I started my very first job, I came home and said to my husband in December, I need to make cookies right now. And he said, well, we don't celebrate Christmas and that's a Christmas cookie thing. I said, yeah, but I need to do them. Why? Well, because everybody's doing them. And I didn't really have time, and I didn't really know why I felt I needed to do it. It was pure pressure. Now, I make cookies now around the holidays because I love going to a cookie exchange, whether I'm celebrating Christmas or not. I celebrate Hanukkah, I celebrate cookies. So I want to be there.
And I like cookies.
And I love cookies. So the thing is that I do things because they bring me joy. I spend time with people because I'm with you right now because you bring me joy, Rose.
Oh, that's nice. You know, and I love that because I think we do make choices to do that, and that's why we're doing this. You know,
Yeah.
and I think if things get too overwhelming for you, find out what you need to do to make it easier. For example, making a list, because if I don't write it down, I'm going to forget.
Yeah.
So, and then it's going to be like, oh, I forgot about that.
And the reason I stumbled over your name just now is because I wanted to say, when I rise on today, I think of Rose. And it's true. When I get up in the morning, I say to myself, what am I going to do today? And the answer needs to be all things that make me feel fulfilled. Now, I am not suggesting that you spend your day in bed because it makes you happy, or spend your day sitting and eating chocolate and talking on the phone because it makes you happy. I'm not saying don't be productive. I'm not, although that can be very productive.
Because this is a
Sometimes you need it.
This is a show about being overwhelmed.
That's right. And that's the other thing. Take time that you need. Take time to go get a manicure if that's your thing, or take your child to the movies, or spend some time, and spend some time looking at each other and saying, how are you today? What's going on with you today? Those are the things that are just as important as achieving. And achievement is really about what fulfills you. That's what makes you feel, hopefully, at the end of the day, like you had a wonderful, wonderful day.
And I'm thinking there's another part to this, which is the modeling aspect and what you're doing through not only your actions and your words, but people can see those behaviors, right? And so then they're like, oh, well, you took the time to just step back and do that, so we must be able to do that, or that's a good thing to do.
Exactly. We are modeling for people all the time. There's so often, so many times I will think to myself, well, now, I noticed my colleague do that, or I noticed my friend did that, or if she did it, then I can do it too. I know people who are busier than you and me. They have a lot more to do than you and me. We think we're the only ones that have so much on our plate. There are people, you know, that expression, need something done, ask a busy person. We are always then modeling for other people how we can make our lives fulfilling. And I'm here to say that bringing in more and doing it the way you always did it, and not allowing yourself the ability to think about, why do I feel overwhelmed and what can I eliminate? Here's another example. I always have the holidays at my house. Susan, it just has to be that way. No, it doesn't. You can take turns. And if you say to me, well, I have the biggest house, so they always come to me. What's wrong with going to your relative's house who may not have as big of a house, but you don't all have to sit at one table. You can sit at the kitchen table, somebody else can sit at the dining room table, or let's make it casual, and for this holiday, we'll sit with a plate on our lap and we'll be in the living room and we'll all enjoy each other. Or another way to do it, we won't have dinner, we'll have hors d'oeuvres. Well, Susan, I'm working right up until Christmas Eve. Okay, then serve hors d'oeuvres at the holiday party, or do something that doesn't make it so that you're cooking till 6 in the morning.
Or have everyone bring a dish.
When people say, what can I bring? Don't say nothing. say you can bring that. People love to bring things. They love to contribute. That's another way that we can make it, that we can taper it back and still have a wonderful time. No matter what, if you think of anything that you do, there's a way to do it that can give you that time back. And you may say, but I don't want to go out and buy the cake. I can make a cake, you know, that's better. But wouldn't you rather spend the time reading to your child than making the cake? If it comes down to, I only have an hour, then you need to say to yourself, so what do I want that hour to be? The time that I have saved from not sending out the cards, I do make phone calls to my friends who I haven't seen, or I sit down with the people in my family and spend the time with them. I would much rather present a less frenetic version of myself to the people in my life than do, have, get all that accomplished.
And that's a wonderful takeaway. Susan, again, a great show for giving us tips and strategies for how to be less busy in our own lives. Special thanks to Susan Harf again for the tips and strategies for how to get some things done. It can be scary to let those things go in our lives. It can be scary to change, but it's all worth it because we're going to live our very, very best life. Special thanks to Susan for another great show. We hope you'll join us next time. I'm Rose Martin. Thanks, everybody.